Today is the 5th day of this April 1983 5-day retreat. We will begin by talking about some things that people have brought up during meetings. Starting about thoughts, talking about thoughts. Several people, in listening to what is said during talks, have told me that they get the impression that I advocate getting rid of thoughts. And there's quite understandably a great frustration with this. First of all, I don't consciously remember ever having advocated to get rid of anything. Because who is the one that wants to get rid of or thinks that she or he has to get rid of, or thinks she must follow a teacher who says, get rid of? This whole work is never a matter of getting rid of things, but seeing things for what they are, and maybe things dropping off on their own because they've been seen and seen to be useless, wasteful, damaging, or dangerous. If you walk through the forest and you pick up a nice green, make a bouquet out of it, and somebody says to you, you know what you're holding in your hand? It's poison ivy. You drop it. It's no problem. How am I going to drop this poison ivy? You drop it. It's dropped. If you know that it's poisonous, if you've been stung before or had a rash, or have seen people who have had rashes or heard descriptions about it. One person said, you seem to be saying something about having no thoughts, but there are thoughts, but they somehow are not problematic. They are peripheral. They're there and they're not apart, but they don't disturb, they don't interfere. Well then, what's the problem? There is none. Or is there? If you need to listen very carefully to something or someone, because it's very important for you to understand or to see, then there is an all-consuming attention. And what the attention consumes is thoughts. Thoughts interfere and they don't enter because the attention is all-consuming. But usually we don't feel this way about anything. That's why it's sort of a mixture of partial attention and thinking. If thinking is going on, what is the nature of it? What is it all about? One person said, there seems to be just this constant babbling going on in the mind. It's not particularly directed toward anything, not particularly motivated. It's just noise. Is it? Is there a certain comfort in having that noise just as millions of people coming home at night from work into an empty room or apartment, first thing turn on the radio so that there's something there. Many people who are home, women who are home with their children, first thing in the morning the television is turned on, the talk shows. And as I've observed it, people don't listen to it necessarily, don't sit there and watch the program. They go about their thing, but this thing is there. There's someone in the house with me. And the talk showers do their level best to make you feel that they're your friend. That they care about you. I once read that when there was a very famous doctor show on, I don't remember what that doctor was, what the name of him is. He was the most caring doctor that you've never met. And in an interview he said he got thousands of letters of people asking him for advice, totally forgetting that this was a very good actor. It wasn't a doctor. But he cared. My doctor doesn't care. He doesn't give a hoot about this wrist. In the same way, the mind occupies itself with babbling. Watch it. Don't just say, well, it's just babbling, it's inconsequential, it's random. But watch it, observe it, let it come into awareness. Is there someone at center stage? Usually is. Seeing oneself in some role. Past role, present role, or future role. Maybe arguing past arguments and doing it better than one really did it at the time. Future arguments. That time I'm going to do it right. And it works so well. So it's much more satisfying to have this meeting in one's mind. It's not a matter of getting rid of thought, but to become aware of what goes on, how one occupies one's mind, and that one needs to occupy it. That is a dreadful thing that there be no occupied mind, an unoccupied mind. One person said, don't we need to think? You always talk about that as though something really good is happening when there's no thought in the mind. But isn't thought necessary? Of course thought is necessary. We couldn't be talking to each other if there was no thinking. And when thought is necessary and acts properly, factually, then there's no problem then. We do have to plan certain things out, even if we go on a trip. It needs to be planned in some way. At our job, we have to think things through. but it merits to watch how we think things through. Is it just factual thinking, based on facts and getting more facts if we don't have enough? Or are there assumptions, which is partly laziness to go after facts? And is there also the focus of this me? I'm really pretty good at that. I've got to convince them, or I'm better than the other one. I hope I'll get the promotion, I'll do all I can. All this is totally accessible and observable. When things like this are described, as one person said to me, you describe a terrible picture about people or about relationship. Well, is it a terrible picture or is it so? Are relationships or things like this, in this way? Is it just a fantasy which is being put into words here? Find out. One person said, the idea of it horrifies me of what you say about relationship. But how is your relationship? Is it like that? You may have never looked, you may not want to look because you're afraid that it may be, well, the description was horrible or terrible. That is not a very useful word. It's an emotionally laden word, evokes reactions. Nothing that is said as, this is so. But is it so? Find out. It happens this way, that when things are pointed out or questioned and one has listened, it is for some reason easier for something to come into awareness in one's own life. When nothing has been pointed out, nothing has been listened to of this kind, then one just slurs over all this stuff, because we really don't want to see how we live. We want to live in ideal, rosy pictures, even if there's daily pain and agony. We cling to the rosy pictures of our life. In thinking about other people or talking about other people, how do we think about other people? In terms of what they've already done in the past? If there's this structure, this mold already in the mind, how a person is and has acted in the past, then this molds future impressions. It's like a distorting mechanism. We don't see clearly what the person actually says and does, but we already have this idea in mind what he is. And then what he does very often is misconceived, misconstrued, misunderstood, so as to fit this picture which we already have of him or her. Can one become aware of this mechanism in the mind? The danger of images. And then if other people tell one about this person, it all feeds into that, and one doesn't say, wait a minute, was this really so? Let me find out. Let me ask this person. Or let me observe more. I don't know enough about this person. Before I engage in this favorite pastime of gossip, which is so dangerous, so harmful, and so satisfying. Satisfying because in putting someone else down, talking about someone else in gossipy ways, negative ways, one feels better oneself for some crazy reason. If there is not insight into oneself, into what one is doing, and that oneself is that other person too. So thinking merits our full attention. How is it motivated? Is there a motive? One person once asked me, why do we need to know our motives in Zen? When there are motives and you don't see them, your actions are driven, dangerously driven. And you may think that you're acting selflessly because you have the idea of selflessness in your mind. And you don't see the selfish motive. One person said, isn't it terrible to see all this selfishness? What do you mean by that? It is there. Either it's there or it's not there. If it's there, doesn't it need to be seen? The next response is, well, then what do I do about it? Can I get rid of it? We see something that's terrible, that doesn't look good, and then I want to get rid of it. That's the same I as the selfishness that's seen. When the I gets rid of selfishness, the I is left with an idea of having become unselfish, but it's still the I. So if selfishness is seen, is detected, honestly, openly, nakedly, without trying to touch it over, is that selfishness? But if you immediately tell yourself how selfish you are, then you make a thing out of it. You identify with that. That's me. That's not the clarity of seeing. In the clarity of seeing, there's no identification. This is me. This is you. This is selfishness. And selfishness is the same in me and you and you. In every human being. It's the same when you meet together to discuss something or to come to a decision. How does the discussion take place? Is it factual? Or is what you put forth already invested with me? So that when someone doesn't agree with it, you are personally attacked. So you have to defend. Stick to it. And you can't listen. But if what you put forth, and what you put forth and you put forth is not invested with me, it's factual, it's to the best of your knowledge, which is never complete, then a free discussion can take place because there are no me's battling each other. In saying this doesn't look good to me, you don't insult someone. In saying this looks good, you don't flatter someone. All of that is lifted out of the meeting. And therefore there's a real meeting. Which means there has to be constant checking. Am I invested in this? Not saying from the beginning, tonight in this meeting I'm not going to be invested, and then you got this idea and you don't see that you are. It takes moment to moment observation. And one moment of no investment, the next moment there may be one. So it takes constant attention. And if there's not, there's investment. And therefore battle and disagreement, which is sticky and exhausting. Getting to another point which was brought up by a person who said, if I understand you right, maybe I don't, but what I get from hearing from you, I'm supposed to resist all the things that I love. Clothes, sex, and so forth. And I feel I'm supposed to resist this or give it up. It's a very similar point like the other. I don't see how one can hear this out of what is being said, but so it is perceived. Maybe one is already listening with a fear, a conditioned fear that any kind of religious talk is about renunciating. Renouncing. Oh, is that maybe the same word? Because one is so afraid one may have to renounce, one hears it. Yeah, she said that. Are you aware of how you live? The fears, the fear of losing a person, and therefore strong attachment. That fear is there no matter what is said here. Why are we so dependent on other people? On what they say, on what they do, and on having them, possessing them, clinging to them. Out of fear of standing alone on one's own 2 feet, which one is so totally incapable of doing most of the time, or is one? Because we've been trained to cling, to follow, to obey, to conform, and then we're good. Actually, there is no such thing as a renunciation. It's an idea. If something is seen to be no longer needed, it's no longer needed. Then no one has to renunciate. The need drops away. The thing is no longer craved. In a similar vein, one person said in the beginning of this retreat, in the opening talk, you said, can old problems just drop away? And then you say, look at your problems. Seems to be a contradiction there. Well, it's certainly a contradiction in ideas. The idea of dropping problems and the idea of looking at problems, they collide. Do you see how we live in ideas? And then get all confused by conflicting ideas? What was meant was, can old problems drop away? If something comes up now, this instant, can it be seen freshly, not as something that I've known from the past, and therefore react in habitual ways to it, as something I don't know, because that's the truth. What comes up now is not an old problem, it's what comes up now. How do I meet it? With the old mold? The old program? Do I see that I meet it that way and therefore it drops away and I can look freshly at anger without calling it anger, without thinking anger is a despicable thing for an adult person? Or my anger is so justified because it's really outrageous how this person behaved toward me. Then you don't look at your anger. Then you think about how this person behaved toward you. And as you think about it, your anger mounts. So without calling it anger, what is it? Not as an old problem, not as anything, but as what is here right now. One person said, let me ask you one question. Is mind energy? And my response was, do you want to find out about the indestructible Dharma body? Whether there is such a thing? And the person responded, yeah, isn't there something when we die? There must be something. Isn't there? What good is it what anybody says? If one is consumed by this need to know, whether all there is this daily life, which one probably doesn't live completely, or else this question wouldn't come up. The idea, let's say the idea of this daily life and ending in death, is that all there is? People have asked this, I think, since people have been on this earth. And invented and created. And maybe some have seen. And maybe put into words what others then have started believing and repeating. Fantasizing about or singing about. Becoming inspired about the written words of others. Let me read a paragraph and maybe a few more if there's time. From Wang Po, Transmission of the Mind, translated by John Blofeld. Keeping in mind that is someone else's words. Unless you see what these words point toward by yourself, it just remains words. They may be inspiring, make you feel good, but that good feeling evaporates very quickly and needs to be boosted again. If an ordinary man or person, when he's about to die, could only see the 5 elements of consciousness as void, I'll read the whole thing first, then we'll go through it. The 4 physical elements as not constituting an I, the real mind as formless and neither coming nor going, his nature as something neither commencing at his birth nor perishing at his death, but as whole and motionless in its very depths, his mind and environmental objects as one. If he could really see this, here it says accomplish this, or we can say if this could really take place, because it's not an accomplishment, he would receive enlightenment in a flash. He would no longer be entangled by the triple world being past, present, and future. He would be a world transcender. He would be without even the faintest tendency toward rebirth. He would be without the faintest tendency toward rebirth. If he should behold the glorious sight of all the Buddhas coming to welcome him, surrounded by every kind of gorgeous manifestation, he would feel no desire to approach them. If he should behold all sorts of horrific forms surrounding him, he would experience no terror. He would just be himself, herself, if you will, oblivious of conceptual thought and one with the Absolute, who would have attained the state of unconditioned being. This then is the fundamental principle. Some people have told me that they have problems with Wang Po's vocabulary, so we'll try to comment a little about it. If an ordinary man, not a saint or a spiritual person. I was once told by someone who was engaged in Zen work, and this person's wife was engaged in another spiritual tradition, and they had a son. And this son asked his parents, when I grow up, do I have to become a spiritual person? Some people come into meeting and they say, what you talk about or what I read and hear, is this possible for me? Or it doesn't seem possible, it's impossible. That's why we do this work, that's why we're into it, because it's impossible. So if an ordinary person when he's about to die, it doesn't mean at the end of his or her life. Death can take place at any time, when there's no time. When an ordinary person about to die could only see the 5 elements of consciousness as void, at that time of dividing up the functions of consciousness, it was forms, including the physical body. See the physical body as void, meaning no fear of pain, no attachment to pleasure. I'm not saying no pleasure, but no attachment to it. There are physical pleasures. There are physical pains. Does one make memories out of them, cling to the memories, project them into the future, either fearing for this to happen again or yearning for this to happen again? That's not voidness. Voidness is no attachment, which does not mean no feeling. It means no attachment, no grabbing it, clutching it, addiction to it. So form is the one element of consciousness. Thinking, feeling, willing, wanting, willing. Sometimes it's called choice. No choice, no willing. The will, or willpower, is an expression of the me. I want to get that. And because I sense resistance, or there is resistance, therefore I'm going to push right through it. Because I want what's on the other side of the hump of resistance. What is resistance? If that question is asked, it needs no willpower, because if resistance is looked at attentively, patiently, how it arises, how it acts, the consequences of it, may dissolve all its own. May need no willpower to smash it. Because what is smashed with willpower builds up again. Has not been seen and understood. Smashing leaves traces. Seeing leaves no traces. Sensation is another element of consciousness. Emotions, we don't need to restrict ourselves to 5. The whole of consciousness is consciousness, and it's void, meaning constantly changing. You can't put a name to it. What you name is not the whole thing, not even the whole part is the name. No names. No labels. So if an ordinary person about to die could only see consciousness as void, in spite of all the turmoil that's going on, What is it? As some people have discovered, it is empty. It's there, it's peripheral, and yet it doesn't dominate one. At least at the point of dying. To this me, to wanting, to fearing, to being someone, to being no one, can become the new identity. The four physical elements as not constituting an I. Four physical elements is how the body was conceived, as being put together by fire, air, water, and earth. Metal is in there someplace, that would be a fifth. This body, can one just see it as that? Or is one the owner of that? Where is the owner? Where does he live? Or she? To see this body as not constituting an I, a me, a psychological entity there. We've talked about it in previous talks. This clinging to this psychological entity and its story, its continuity, and the fear of its coming to an end. And here Wang Po is talking about that. Dying to that, to this I. Not as a tour de force, a violent act of willpower. But seeing the truth that there is no I. It's fictitious. It's an idea carried over since time immemorial. Physical elements as not constituting an I. Some people at this point stop saying I, but that doesn't mean much if the conviction and the feeling is still there that there is one there, so one just uses new language, but that doesn't resolve the feeling of I or me or mine. It's nothing wrong with saying I if one understands the limitations of this word. Use it for convenience. But just to say, I use it for convenience, is not observing how one uses it. It may not only be for convenience, it may be for assertion. And then there's trouble with other eyes. Wang Po continues, the real mind, he capitalizes this, as formless, neither coming or going. No form, no limit, no limit. No barriers. Coming and going are thoughts, if you observe very carefully. If there is no thought, there is no coming or going. There's only walking or driving or sitting. His nature is something neither commencing at his birth nor perishing at his death. You can see this is an idea. Must be very careful with this. To adopt that Wang Po says, my nature didn't start at my birth and is not going to end at my death. How wonderful. Now I've got it from the horse's mouth. But do we see that birth and death themselves for us are concepts. Talked about it at length yesterday, this hope or aspiration to free oneself from life and death. This life and death that one wants to free oneself of are concepts. Do you see that? Death, what is death? You have never died. Awarely, in awareness. And what that is will only reveal itself when there's really dying. Without knowing. Other than that, it's an idea. We hope to get rid of ideas by adopting new ideas. His nature as whole and motionless in its very depth. That's not an idea. Wholeness can be a beautiful idea, but it is not an idea. When there is no part in the middle, no me in the middle, directing, controlling, fearing, running, craving. When that is seen wholly, that's wholeness. Which has no enclosure, no walls, no separation between you and me. Whole and motionless in its very depth. Has one come upon this motionlessness at times? When the birds that are flying aren't moving. They're just flying. When sounds don't break the silence. Because sounds too are motionless and silent in their very depth. His mind and environmental objects as one. No distance that the words create. Words create distance. Reactions create distance. I like this, I don't like this. Then there's a me and what I don't like. If this could really take place, if you could really accomplish this, there would be enlightenment in a flash. This not meaning a flash of light. This is what, when one hears this word and reads about it, one waits for and expects, and if there is an experience of light, then there's great gladness. It may be a wonderful feeling. That's what it is. Is there attachment already? Growing like a vine around this thing? Is it already a memory? Or is it just there and not there? No investment in it? No me who is having it? He would no longer be entangled by the triple world, past, present, future, which are all thoughts, thought created. You can check this for yourself. The past is your past memories. What is the present? Are you really here? Not through the glasses of the past? Then the present is also the past. Do you subscribe to this thing we hear so much these days? I'm living in the here and now, I'm living in the present. It's so easy to say, but it's words. What does it mean to live in the present? No thought of the presence. No thought of living in it. No separation. And the future? What is the future? Look at it right now. It's thinking about it, isn't it? Because you can flip a calendar around with your fingers, but that's a calendar being flipped around by fingers with numbers on it. That's not the future. Future is a thought. In truth, there's only, always, this instant, only. Everything else is projected by thought. Happy thoughts or scary thoughts. All affecting this presence. Meaning, one lives in thoughts of the future rather than being in touch with what's here now. Here Wang Po says, would no longer be entangled by past, future, and present. Which doesn't mean one doesn't make a plan for a future trip or for a future job, a future building. But this future is thoughts. He would be without even the faintest tendency toward rebirth. Rebirth being a very important part of the Buddhist teaching. Here Wang Po says, not the faintest tendency toward it. When there's no fear of death, there's no tendency toward rebirth. Because dying, each moment, each day, there's always rebirth, if you want to give it that word. Something new. Because as the old has dropped away, it's not carried around in a knapsack, which gets heavier and heavier and heavier because we accumulate everything. Things and people and thoughts and memories. And we wonder why we're so exhausted, carrying it all around. If I'm dissatisfied with this life, then I hope for rebirth and a better life. If this life is lived, this moment is lived completely, future life becomes irrelevant. It's extra. What's important is how I live this instant. Do I live it completely? Am I here? Or do I think of my future life? Then I'm not here. then I'm in my thoughts and hopes and fears. If he should behold the glorious sight of all the Buddhas coming to welcome him, surrounded by every kind of gorgeous manifestation, no desire to approach them. This being written by a man in the Buddhist tradition writes about appearance of Buddhas. If he was writing in the Christian tradition, he would write about appearance of Holy Mary, Christ, God, or the saints. Never found that a Christian has visions of bodhisattvas and Buddhas, or a Buddhist has visions of the Virgin Mary. Visions are conditioned. People may not want to hear that, but examine it. An American Indian has visions of his guardian spirit, as it was taught to him and told him and pictured since time immemorial. So he thinks, and so he envisions. We envision, and then we either love what we envision or we are scared by what we envision. It's all the production of the mind, of the human mind. We create our own heaven and hell. And we crave for it or we shudder. We never question the creator of both. Should behold all sorts of horrific forms surrounding him, he would experience no terror. Why not? Because there would be understanding that these were the creations of the mind. We don't see that, we get entangled in it. No one can tell us this is the creation of your mind. We have to see that ourselves. If somebody tells us, then we think, oh, this person doesn't understand me. I am so misunderstood. No one really understands me. This is how a lot of people in mental hospitals must feel, totally not understood. And yet all of us create visions and fantasies. It's just a matter of degree. Why can't we understand each other? He would just be himself. Just be oneself. To be just oneself, what does that mean? It could be a koan all its own. What does it mean to be oneself? After all that's been said and read. It's said a lot these days in psychology, psychological therapy, and group therapy. Become yourself. One engages in all kinds of expressions of feelings, and I'm not debunking it, but is that oneself? What is oneself? What do feelings express? What do we have to express? Isn't it always the self, the me? that either has never been allowed to express itself, it has had to repress all feelings. Such an urge to express itself. What does it mean to be oneself? He doesn't say become oneself, but be oneself. Is it possible to be oneself with no self? No need for expression, but everything one does expresses what? Life? Do we need words? He would just be himself, oblivious of conceptual thought. We can also add oblivious of images of oneself. No need to express an image that one has of oneself as being humble or important, clever, failure. We have these images and then we have to express them. No image, maybe no need for expression. Which does not mean repression of feelings. Feelings are seen for what they are. They are not rejected. Seen. Felt, touched. And they're empty. You would have attained the state of unconditioned being. Not controlled and run and dominated and driven by conditioning, which is the state of inattention, unawareness, unconsciousness, unconditioned being. Careful not to make an ideal out of this. Always to ask, is this possible? It seems impossible. One person said, after all, I've got to eat. Got to keep warm. Of course you eat. But that's conditioning. No, it's eating. Yeah. What we eat, that we like this food rather than that, is conditioning. But is that harmful? Watch it. See whether it's harmful, divisive, whether it sustains, maintains, and affirms the me, or whether it's just nourishing. And then the meal is over. We buy clothes. Most of us like to buy nice looking clothes. Somebody asks, what's wrong with that? I don't know what's wrong with it. Is it? You gotta look. Putting all your money into clothes so you can't eat? Or go on a vacation? If you do, why? Because you're afraid you won't be attractive? All of this can be looked at and reveal itself. You don't have to ask anybody but yourself. And not give an answer right away, but to say, I'm going to watch it, observe. Because I want to find out. If you do, you will find out. If you don't want to find out, then why ask someone? which doesn't mean don't ask questions. It's important to ask questions. And maybe we can look at it together for a little while, but then you're on your own again. Or are you? We will end here for today.